Who are all of our new moms out there? Or maybe veteran moms or moms who just have a story about what it was to become a mom. This is something that we are never prepared for, even though everyone gives you all the advice under the sun. And support is crucial. You are going to hear today from one of our holistic healers of Orange County, Chelsea Crofuentes, who has dedicated her business to supporting moms. Please have a listen. I promise you that you are going to leave this episode feeling much more equipped and ready to be supported. And if you know someone, if this is not you and you know someone who is struggling or who could benefit from listening to this, please do forward and share this episode. Maternal mental health is not talked about enough, and we need to spread the word.
SAGE is a 501c3 nonprofit organization building community by providing education and counseling about physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. We encourage all of our listeners to find their own path to what holistic wellness means to you.
So I'm just going to briefly present on PMADS, touch on attachment and somatic experiencing. Let me set myself a timer so I know kind of where I'm at.
And you'll have 20 minutes to present and then 10 minutes for question and answer time at the end in case there's, so however it needs to kind of be fluid. You have a total of like 30 minutes, okay?
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is me. I'm Baby Bump Therapy. I'm an LMFT and also certified in perinatal mental health. This is my family. You guys saw Sadie, our 3.5-year-old, and George, my husband. And then that is Sienna. She is about 5.5 months right now. And I'll talk a little bit more, but George, I don't know I think he introduced himself to a couple of you, but he specializes in men and modern male issues. I don't say it as well as he does, but he could tell you later. And together we specialize in couples. We're couple for couples counseling. And then individually, it is me, and I specialize in maternal mental health and just that transition to motherhood. I like to start with kind of the myths of motherhood. We see all these pictures in the media of totally blanking on her name, Kate, Princess Kate. I know she's not a princess, but I'm going to call her that. This was a couple days after giving birth. It might have been the same day. I'm not sure. But she's all done up, has her makeup on, her earrings, her hair's done. She just looks gorgeous. And, for me, that definitely was not the case. And then, a lot of times we think, oh, it's just going to be so sweet, just gazing into our infant's eyes all the time and then smiling back at us. And it's just, those moments do happen, but it's just not always gonna happen. And these are some pictures I found that felt more real to me. You see, baby peeing on himself, dropping the kids. I did read a story about that photo at the beach, and they said that the kids were okay. No one got hurt in that picture, so I felt comfortable sharing that one because it looks a little scary. But this is actually real life, and it can be difficult when we see all these social media images of people. I remember too, Heidi Klum ran the runway in a Victoria's Secret fashion show, I think like 2 weeks after she gave birth or something just ridiculous. I'm like, what? You're not even human. So let's talk about some more of these myths. This one was interesting for me to learn that the myth is kind of that most pregnancies are planned, but we know that over half of all pregnancies are actually unplanned. People will think, oh, getting pregnant will be easy for me. It will be hard for me. And the reality is we really don't know what it's going to be like. There's this myth, this saying, sleep like a baby. I actually saw a meme about this. I got to find it to add to this because it was really funny. And it's like, I don't want to sleep like a baby. I just want to sleep like my husband. And I could relate to that, George. But newborns get up every about 2 to 3 hours to feed. So they're not sleeping through the night, especially at the beginning. Little Miss Sadie didn't sleep through the night till after she turned 2 years old. So we had a long time of sleep deprivation with her. Sienna, on the other hand, she's been sleeping through the night for like at least a month now, which is just, I'm counting my blessings with that. But every baby is so different. It's so fun to see how different they are. And then we see kind of like this Pinterest mom that, you know, you're expected to be superwoman, to be everything, to do everything, be a wife or a partner. And really, we don't keep it together as well as we thought we would many times. You don't really know what it's like till you're there. I remember being pregnant with Sadie, and I was working at another place at the time, and the boss kept asking me like, oh, are you going to come back? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be like. And I didn't end up going back because it's just so different, and I didn't know what it was going to be like. So just experiencing it. There's this myth that baby will bring couple closer together. And actually the first year after having a baby is the highest rate of divorce. And George and I actually do Gottman's Bringing Baby Home workshop, the 12-hour workshop, because this is so important to help partners stay connected and even strengthen that connection through all the stressors of having a newborn. But babies don't bring couples closer together. They're also not going to rip couples apart as well. And we have this selective memory of older generations, which can actually lead to this unsolicited advice and mom shaming and those media images. And also that pregnancy equals either a wanted baby, a healthy baby, even a live baby, or pregnancy is finally going to fulfill you. And really, it's going to be different each time and for each person. I've only gone through pregnancy twice, and those 2 times were so different from each other, from just the entire pregnancy experience to the birth experience, right? So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But these are some, I like memes. I think they're pretty funny and relatable. I can relate to all of these. Hate it when people say, well, it could be worse. Well, you know what, Becky? It could have been a hell of a lot better too, right? Just relatable, funny mom memes. So talking more about that, I mean, there are a lot of cultural differences. For whatever reason in the West, we feel like it's almost selfish, or we're almost ashamed to ask for help because we feel like we should be able to do it all. And really, it does take a village to raise a child. You know, there's different seasons in life. And there's a season of giving and a season of receiving. And motherhood is just one of those seasons of receiving, right? There's an ancient Chinese tradition that I thought was really interesting. And, you know, I read a lot about it, and it has kind of the positives and the drawbacks from it. And, but it's really interesting and really shows kind of the cultural differences from the East to the West. And they have this thing called the sitting the month, I think is what it translates to. And all they expect mom to do is eat healthy, rest, physically recover, and feed the baby, which sounds so amazing to me, right? And, you know, there's drawbacks to that as well. But for some reason in the West, we feel like we could, you know, pop out this child and then really quickly return to our normal before, which really isn't realistic. We feel like, oh yeah, we're just going to resume back to our normal mood, our normal work schedule, our normal, whatever was going on before, and we could have it all together and not need as much help, when really that is not realistic and can kind of set you up for some difficulties and challenges. Some of the psychological and physical changes in pregnancy and beyond is it's all about me, having some awareness of how life is going to change, but again, really not knowing what it means to really go from me to having this child who depends on you for everything. The hormonal changes are going to have estrogen and progesterone be the highest as they ever are going to be in your life during pregnancy. And then during labor and delivery, they just crash down. And then up comes oxytocin and prolactin, these bonding hormones, bringing your milk in. And it's just this huge hormonal change that unlike anything that you'll ever experience in life. Prenatal classes, they tend to focus on labor and delivery, which is great. And definitely Georgia and I did a 16-week labor and delivery class for our first one. And it was so helpful because I really didn't know much about that. And one of the reasons that we love the Gottman's Bringing Baby Home program is because you don't see these classes kind of focus on, okay, baby's born, now what? Right. So that's one example of kind of how it focuses on the postpartum period, and that one in particular, focusing on how to keep partners connected with each other to build a strong foundation for your family. Preparing for parenthood, we go through this biological nesting period, which is this biological response to really prepare for this baby to arrive. The fourth trimester is going to be the postpartum period. During pregnancy, you're like in the spotlight, right? Everybody wants to come like see your belly, touch your belly sometimes. And then baby comes and things kind of shift, and now baby's center of focus. And a lot of times we don't even know what to do when we get home from the hospital, and everything's new to us. This is a whole new transition, and it's not always happy. You're not always glowing. That focus is going to be on baby and really forming that secure early attachment. There's definitely that fatigue, sleep deprivation that comes with the job, loss of freedom, loss of a control of schedule, loss of self-esteem, because sometimes we don't really have a clue what we're doing, and insecurities can come up about your parenting abilities. And, I had somebody tell me, like, when Sadie was maybe like a week old, they're like, oh, she's crying. What does she need? And I'm like, am I supposed to know what she needs? Because I have no idea. I just met this child. So I didn't even know what her cries meant. And then, this is such a huge transition that our perspective completely changes, our dreams, our expectations. Birth sometimes doesn't go as expected. We have this idea of a birth plan, right? And I know I didn't get to use either of my birth plans for either of my girls because it went not as I expected. And then we have to learn new skills. We have to learn how to be that same partner if we're in a relationship, with this new role as a parent too. And we have to face fears and feelings, renegotiate responsibilities and relationships. Oftentimes, research shows that couples actually will kind of go into more traditional gender roles after they have kids, which is really interesting. And we have to rely on support systems, which was definitely difficult, especially during this past year with the pandemic. Breast or bottle feeding is, a huge thing right now, because a lot of times moms can get shamed if they're not breastfeeding. And I really like how the Fed is Best is out now rather than the breast is best, because as long as the baby's getting that nutrition. And then, of course, the physical and emotional healing from the labor and delivery process. So I always remind my moms that it's okay to feel that grief and loss, along with all the joys of being a mom, because it's kind of this dichotomy where these both come up and we have these two very conflicting feelings, and that's completely normal and it's okay to feel that. But moms can feel guilty for, they might have this really healthy baby and they feel guilty that they're grieving their former self. We lose that former identity when we have a baby. It's kind of our life before is split to our life now as a mom. Of course, at the loss of a baby or having unexpected health conditions is definitely at the high end of the spectrum. Having a traumatic birth, or again, that birth not going as planned. Having a baby during a pandemic. George and I did that. We had her at the height of the second wave of the pandemic, which was definitely an interesting experience. And then we've talked about a lot of this, and loss of body image. Your body is not going to ever be the same again. And loss of financial means, your money is going to different places. And then especially for women, sometimes there's this element of this loss of career or career potential. I'm going to touch on perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So we know this kind of replaces the old term of postpartum depression, right? Because we know that depression and anxiety disorders can really occur anytime during pregnancy and throughout the first year postpartum. And about 80% of new moms are going to experience the baby blues within the first couple of weeks after birth. And this is completely normal. It's so common. And about 1 in 5 to 7 mothers, depending on what you look at, experience serious depression or anxiety during pregnancy or postpartum. We'll touch briefly on postpartum psychosis, which is very rare, and also about 1 in 10 fathers experience postpartum depression, which I didn't know before I learned about this. And in dads, this is going to look a little different. This initial high after birth might give way to depression, and rather than looking like sadness, men might be more likely to be irritable or aggressive and sometimes even hostile. You'll see them distancing or checking out, maybe playing video games more, going to their man cave, or maybe just staying at work later just to avoid. And a lot of times this stems from feeling burdened or trapped or financially responsible. Might feel overwhelming to them. And also feeling outside of the circle of attention, right? Because babies get the attention and then it's moms. And a lot of times dads get left out. And women are a lot better, in a general sense of reaching out in a social way than men are. So that's about dads. Why this is important and why I'm so passionate about this is because PMADs are actually the #1 childbirth complication. About 2 to 10% of pregnancies are going to get gestational diabetes or hypertension, according to the CDC, and this is for the US. About 6% are going to get preeclampsia, as compared to about 21% of women are going to experience some form of a PMAD. And the consequences are detrimental. I mean, suicide, infanticide, or homicide being the most detrimental consequences. Suicide's in the top 3 leading causes of maternal death. And why the top 3? Because states have different reporting requirements. So it's really unknown exactly how prevalent. Some states aren't required to report. But, and then at other detrimental levels, we have relationship problems, financial stressors, unemployment, disability, behavioral problems, and we'll see developmental delays in kids, and then child abuse and neglect. So here's some myths and facts about postpartum depression, which really got a bad name for itself. Back in 2001, I don't know if any of you remember that tragic story of Andrea Yates drowning her 5 kids in Houston. And that was labeled by the media as postpartum depression when really that was postpartum psychosis. So that was mislabeled, and it's really been stigmatized because of that. And for many other reasons. And a lot of moms think, oh, it'll go away on its own if it comes up during pregnancy. Oh, after I have my baby, I'll be okay. And we know that actually, for the most part, it does get worse without professional help or some sort of professional intervention. So these are all the kind of disorders that fall under these PMAD category, and I'll briefly touch on them both. But this is just a layout, a comparison of the baby blues, which is normal, and then the DSM diagnosis of depression, and then perinatal depression. And the biggest difference that we're looking for is with baby blues, it's going to last no longer than 2 days to 2 weeks. So if it's lasting longer than 2 weeks, and it could come up at any point during the first year, then that's going to tell us that, okay, that's perinatal depression. And also we know it could happen during pregnancy too. And one of the hallmark symptoms is not being able to sleep given the opportunity. So if you ask a mom, okay, say you have a hotel room all to yourself for the day, you have no worries, your kids are safe, would you be able to sleep? And if they say no, not at all, that's definitely a red flag. And a lot of times perinatal depression actually presents as comorbid with anxiety. And so something to look at. Okay, 20 minutes. And with baby blues, also the underlying overarching mood is going to be happiness and a sense of joy. So even though that you have these outward symptoms, there's still going to be that overarching mood of this underlying happiness. So Tiffany Field has done a lot of great research on how depression affects the baby, and Ed Tronick with the still face experiment. But we know that a mother's emotions during pregnancy can have an effect on the developing fetus. And as a result, depressed parents are known to have difficulty reading their baby's cues, or they might tend to ignore them altogether. And kids of depressed parents learn to be unresponsive, emotionally withdrawn, lacking joy. And when a parent is depressed, we actually see the brainwave patterns of the baby start to resemble those of the depressed parent. And the good news in this is if there is a partner who is not depressed, they could be a buffer between the depressed partner and the baby. And that's Ed Tronick's still face experiment. And obviously not going to play that because of time, but I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. And that really just shows the effects and the impacts even a short-term still face has on a child. So briefly, perinatal anxiety and panic disorders, there's a lot of these same symptoms and somatic symptoms that come up as a general anxiety disorder. OCD will look the same in a lot of ways as well. It might look like, obsession with germs, cleanliness, maybe changing the baby's diaper too often, things like that. And then the important thing is that these thoughts are ego-dystonic. So, really the thoughts do not equal action, and the moms with this actually have a deep sense of guilt for having these thoughts. These ego-dystonic thoughts really come out of a place of the brain where I want to protect my baby. I want what's best for my baby, but somehow my brain is twisting this into worst case scenario. And these thoughts are very intrusive, repetitive, and usually thoughts of harm coming to the baby. But these thoughts do not equal action, which is the bottom line. PTSD, a lot of the same symptoms. You're going to see some postpartum PTSD themes. So Dr. Cheryl Beck found 4 common themes in perinatal PTSD. First one being a perception of a lack of caring, feelings of abandonment, dignity is stripped. Maybe you did things to my body without asking. This can definitely trigger trauma of sexual abuse. And then poor communication, feelings of being invisible. Maybe you hear the doctors or nurses talking in hushed tones, saying, we might lose this baby or something like that, and asking and not getting a response. This feeling of powerlessness, a betrayal of trust, feeling unprotected by staff, and then do the ends justify the means? So a lot of people will go to this place where, okay, well, you had a healthy baby, so you're okay now, when really the process of getting there was traumatic. PTSD in NICU parents, I could speak personally to that, as Sienna was born January 2nd of this year. She was due March 20th. So she came at 29 plus 0 weeks, and she stayed in the NICU for 61 days. And so this was obviously not planned. I had to do an emergency C-section, and also the show This Is Us does a very good, they had I don't know if any of you watched that, but I'm a big fan of that show. And they did a very good portrayal of what this is like with some of their characters. But we might see intrusive memories of infants' hospitalization, avoidance of reminders of childbirth altogether. And I just had to throw in some cute pictures. This is Sienna. I think she's like 5 or 6 days old in this picture after she was extubated. And she was born at 2 pounds, 14 ounces. So she was a teeny little baby. This was us in the hospital. And then here she is now. This is from pretty recently, and she turned 5 months old. So she's almost 11 pounds now. But here's some potentially traumatic perinatal experiences. Emergency C-section, postpartum hemorrhage, prematurity, stillbirth, miscarriage, a history of infertility and infertility treatments, abortion, pregnancy, termination, unexpected NICU admission. And then you could see the list of all these factors. And this is not a complete list of things that can potentially lead to a traumatic experience. So we might see in clients avoidance of aftercare, maybe some impaired mother-infant bonding, sexual dysfunction, PTSD in the partner maybe who witnessed the birth, and sometimes avoidance of future pregnancies. And if they do get pregnant in the future, re-traumatization, and then also opting for an elective C-section. Perinatal psychosis is very rare, but it looks really similar to psychosis. I'm going to kind of skip over this because of time. But 60% of women with bipolar disorder present initially as depressed postpartum, and then they get prescribed this mood stabilizer, and that's when the mania kicks in, and the bipolar diagnosis usually is. And so, I mean, the bottom line is to remember that moms are not to blame. They didn't do anything that caused this. And, this isn't a reflection of who they are as a mother. Some more risk factors. Babies and attachment. Babies are born with this inborn system to really motivate them to seek proximity to a caretaker and establish this communication with them in the service of their survival. And we come into this world biologically programmed to form an attachment. And hopefully we're met with a responsive and reliable caregiver and get that mutual regulation. So the caregiver affects the infant affects the caregiver, and that could go in a negative or positive direction. And this emotional tie is really going to exist throughout the lifespan. It's going to be a template for future relationships, especially for future intimate relationships. There's a high correlation between caregiver's attachment style and the kind of attachment pattern she creates with her own child. There's this delicate balance between the infant's need to be nurtured, taken care of, be responded to, and then the caregiver's desire, willingness, and even ability to provide it. And this internal working model is really developed in infancy, and it's the infant's way of accumulating these repetitive experiences of maternal's responsiveness and reliability. And then based on that visceral experience, they're actually kind of making an appraisal of self as either worthy of that kind of attention or not. And that's something that they carry with them throughout their life. So, Winnicott talks about this primary maternal preoccupation phase when that usually happens in last trimester and postpartum. And this is actually what we want to happen. It's kind of like that honeymoon phase of falling in love with your baby. And it sometimes even is described as this dissociative state that helps moms really block everything out and really tune into their baby and attune to them. And he also talks about the good enough mother having this holding environment for their baby. We know there's no perfect moms, and it's really about that responsiveness and reliability that actually is going to give meaning to the infant's experience and develop that secure attachment. Mary Ainsworth talks about maternal attunement. The development of self is this emergent self coming up in response to the mother's caregiving. And this subjective self comes up usually by around 7 months. And this is when you really recognize, okay, I am in relationship with another person. And we see this attachment relationship forming really in the first 6 months of life. And between 6 to 12 months, it's really consolidating. So that first year is so important. Because it's really going to affect the baby for the rest of their life. And then affect regulation, just our ability to modulate emotions, cope with intense feelings or controlling impulses. And this starts with the relationship with the primary caregiver and their ability to, again, be responsive and reliable. And Dan Siegel, I'm a big fan of him. He talks about what happens to us, how it really affects brain development. And he talks about this experience of feeling the felt sense of existing in the mind and the heart of the other. And that's really, what moms want their babies to feel. The literature never talks about the perfect parent. It always talks about the good enough and repair. So misattunements, I'm going to skip over this because I think you all are familiar with that. And just noting that we are going to mess up. Misattunements are normal, and repair is the critical piece. So, it might look like the baby's going to protest, they'll try to get your attention, and then they'll despair, and then they'll move into this phase of adjustment, which can also be, I think it's also called like settling in, especially with, if you see, like, you could see this in foster kids where they look like, oh, they're adjusting, when really it's more of this kind of dissociative phase, and they're learning, okay, I don't have a reliable caregiver to meet my needs. So that's what we want to avoid. And then just tying it all together with somatic experiencing. This is a chart that represents the symptoms of undischarged traumatic stress. We really want our nervous system to be in this green wave within the normal range. And, when a traumatic event happens, it's just not like that. And we're really co-regulators of each other, in general, as a practitioner with our clients, we could be co-regulators of their nervous system and also with our children. And somatic experiencing talks about these 5 channels of knowing. And, in ideal circumstances, all of these elements, we call it SIBAM, so sensation, image, behavior, meaning, and affect. All of these elements of these channels are open and they're freely flowing and connecting with each other. And then when you have a traumatic event happen, that's when we could see like over or under coupling happen. When some of these channels are getting more associated with each other or even disconnected from one another. So those are kind of some channels you can explore with your clients. Some questions to explore and through a somatic experiencing lens, if you work with moms, might be, okay, when did you know your baby were okay? How did you know that? What part of you knows that you're a good mom? Where do you feel it in your body when baby's crying, when you can't soothe them? Or where do you feel it when baby's settled? And what do you notice as you think about your favorite part of being a mom? And then explore this through image, sensation, feeling, etc. The basis of this is that we believe that mom has everything she needs to regulate herself within herself. And my role as a practitioner and clinician is just to be this co-regulator and supporter of her own nervous system throughout the process. And we want to focus on grounding and resourcing to begin, and then move into this pendulation with the trauma to process that and re-regulate the nervous system, and also to avoid overwhelm. So, okay, I'm done. This is Gottman, or we do the Bringing Baby Home program. George and I created this group, Baby Bumps and Brushes, where we use the baby bump as a canvas to help connect partners with each other and connect baby to your world before birth. And also we have different groups on that. And then this is us, and I think I already introduced us, so I am done. Thank you.
Thank you for spending some of your time today with us at Sage Holistic Health and Wellness Center. If you like what we're all about, please consider supporting our nonprofit organization by making a tax-deductible donation. To do this, you can go to our website at www.sagewellnessctr.org and click on Donate in the upper right-hand corner. We look forward to spending some time again with you real soon. Take good care.